Everything is on board. Thank you. General Dave Patterson has conducted his recce with our guide party, and they've had a really good time. I think it was last week. They got back like over the weekend. Good recce report. We've made some minor adjustments and tweaks that really helps us focus on the logistician side of the house. Sorry, engineer guys, but this is primarily a logistics thing. So it should make sense to you.
We'll let you have one of the operations, John.
Thanks. There's one request from the Merit Travel, and I will share the link later, but they would like to know if there are any dietary restrictions for anyone that we will have you fill in directly on their spreadsheet. If you do have any dietary restrictions, requirement for halal or kosher or anything else, all fine, so long as we know about it. And we'll certainly deal with it. Other than that, things really are falling into place. We have one more meeting with Merit on next week. I think it's on the 5th, and a meeting with the Dutch on the 5th for the Wageningen parade. So, like we said, things are falling into place. Note what Gary said about John Conrad having some problems. And at that, I'm just going to turn it over to Dave Patterson and let him run this evening.
Thanks, John. And as you said, we just got back on Saturday, or for Gary Campbell, very early on Sunday morning back down in Fredericton. From the recce, we had 4 days on the ground, got to meet and see all the sites we're going to be at, and found some new and interesting things that we hadn't found last time, or I didn't know about before, mainly through our Dutch friends and our contacts, telling us about things that we should see. And so we found the actual Dutch, if you like, Service Corps Museum and Remy Museum that we're going to visit on the first day. So get a really good chance to get a hands-on with some of the vehicles and of the Dutch Army all the way through their history, but also obviously a lot of their equipment was given to them by Canada at the end of the war. So they have a lot of Canadian World War II equipment there. So that's one big change that happened on the itinerary. We confirmed our participation in various ceremonies, and so I think things we're 30 days out, D-30. For reference, for Normandy at D-30, all the troops were locked into barbed wire encampments, so we're not going to do that to you guys before the invasion, but we're getting down to the last coordination efforts, and I will be putting out another newsletter with the results, some of the results of the recce, and a little bit of travel advice and that sort of thing to everybody before either later, probably next week, and then we'll carry on. But what we're going to do tonight was going to talk about Operation Plunder and Varsity, which during the recce we were ribbing the signals guys because they're not doing this operation. They got an extra ceremony day, and so we're actually doing more operational battlefield touring on the logistics tour than they are on the signals tour. So we got one up on them. So what I'll do now is just start my presentation, and I can't see everybody's screen when I'm going through here. So if you do have a question, if you put up your hand, use the hand raise reaction there. I'll see that because you'll move to the top of the line. Or if you have at the end, we'll take all the questions you might have. So I'll start sharing my screen again here. There we go. Can you all see that? Okay. So as it happened, we were actually on the battlefield on the 24th of March at the Rhine for the 78th anniversary of the crossing of the Rhine. So it was rather interesting to be there that morning. But these two operations are linked, and so you really can't talk about one without talking about the other. So, we'll do a little bit of both. This is not going to be a very extremely detailed talk, more about the organizations, the background, and you'll get more on the ground when you're there with John and Gary. So we're going to talk about today, how does this operation fit in? Probably if can't really see the show of hands, but most people probably haven't heard of these operations unless you're really into World War II history. The opposing forces involved, the plan of the Allies, and then the two operations, Operation Plunder, which was crossing the Rhine, and Operation Varsity, which was the airborne assault to support the crossing of the Rhine. So this operation happens in the context of what went on in December 1944. There's a graphic of the Battle of the Bulge, or the German Ardennes offensive, which had happened in 16th of December 1944, and took until early January for the Allies to push the Germans back out of that salient, and took basically 3 American armies and part of the British Second Army to do that. So the Allies were distracted from what they wanted to do, which was get close up to the Rhine by this German offensive, which Hitler had wanted to go to. Let me just get a pointer here. Had wanted to go to. There we go. Had wanted to go to Antwerp, but there was no way he was going to get there, and they ran out of gas and ran out of steam, and the Americans took a long time, took about a month to push them all back across where they started from, with huge casualties on both sides. The largest battle for the American army that they have ever fought. So that happens in December. Over the winter of 44-45, the Allies plan for the coming spring and late winter offensives. Canada takes over the Nijmegen area and the area from basically Nijmegen to the coast in the Netherlands. And the British Army starts to plan, the Second British Army starts to plan the crossing of the Rhine, while General Crerar and the First Canadian Army plan the clearing of the battlefield up to the Rhine. And these are the battles that happen from basically early January up until March, when we're going to talk about the crossing of the Rhine. So the red arrow at the top there is the First Canadian Army, Operation Veritable and Blockbuster, combined with the next one down, the 9th U.S. Army, Operation Grenade, and the other U.S. armies going down to the 7th in the south, pushing and clearing that area between the Rhine and their positions in early January. The famous bridge at Remagen, which is here, is captured just before, in late February, just before our crossing of the Rhine, and the Americans under General Hodges start to push across that bridge. But the problem with that bridge is it doesn't really go anywhere. It goes into woods and difficult terrain. So yes, we got a bridge across the Rhine, but the bridges, the terrain to the north, where the British and Canadian armies are, is much more propitious for advancing into Germany, as is the terrain to the south, where Patton and the Third Army are. So a lot is often made of Remagen is captured by a sort of coup de main. They sort of accidentally capture that bridge. The Germans later destroy it. They blow it up. But strategically, it's not really a place you can push an army across. But it is a good morale boost for all the Allied soldiers that we've crossed the Rhine. But Montgomery, Commander 21st Army Group, is still planning his major offensive across the Rhine River in the north. There we go. So who's fighting whom here? So on the Allied side, you have about 1.2 million troops, Allied, British and American, engaged in this battle. The Canadian Army is not much engaged initially in Operation Plunder or Varsity, except in smaller ways, which I'll talk about, as we are still holding the left flank, and we're getting ready to exploit out of the bridgehead that the Second British Army under General Dempsey is going to seize. We also have the 18th Airborne Corps at our disposal, which at that time has 3 airborne divisions, the 6th British Airborne Division, which includes a Canadian battalion, and 2 completely new, untried American airborne divisions, the 17th and the 13th. And the original plan, Montgomery insisted that the airborne be added to this battle to make sure that they could secure the exits from the bridgehead. And the original plan was to drop all 3 of those divisions behind the German lines. Facing the Allies is the 1st German Parachute Army under General Schlemm, with 3 corps, although very much reduced. They have about 70,000 troops altogether in that force facing us. Their divisions are about 4,000 strong. Ours are 15 to 18,000 strong. We have about 5,000 artillery pieces supporting the armies as they cross the Rhine. The Germans have about 1,000. And of course, the German Air Force has pretty much been wiped from the sky after their abortive attack on the 1st of January. So we have air supremacy as well. So that's the context of the forces that are going to be facing each other. The guy in charge of this battle for Monty is General Dempsey, the commander of the 2nd British Army. So what is the plan? Well, the plan is they're going to cross in two armies are going to cross. The 9th U.S. Army down in the southern part of this diagram with the 30th Division and the 79th Division. And in the north, it's 30th British Corps under General Horrocks with 1 division crossing, the 51st Highland Division, and the 12th British Corps with the 15th Scottish Division. So they're going to do the initial crossing. There's also the Commando Brigade, 1st Commando Brigade, which is going to attack actually into the town of Rees, which is a major town right on the only major town really right on in the area where they're going to do the crossings. And the intent is to seize crossings across the river, expand the bridgehead, and then push through follow-on forces, including the 1st Canadian Army, into the bridgehead. So this is the laydown for Op Plunder. You can see along here, as I said, the 51st Highland Division, the 15th Scottish Division are crossing. That's after they've got across. They're crossing here, across from Rees. Sorry, the Commando Brigade goes into Wesel, not Rees. My mistake there. 15th Division crossing here, the Commando Brigade, and then the American divisions, the 30th and the 79th. So the 24th of March is D-Day for this, the day that the battle is going to take place. And in support of this, the Allies have brought up an enormous amount of logistic support. The food, fuel, ammunition. They've even brought landing craft on flatbed trucks from Antwerp by across country, so that they can cross the Rhine in landing craft, both Royal Navy and U.S. Navy landing craft. So they're not crossing in little boats; they're crossing in actual landing craft, similar to what they would have landed at on Juno Beach on D-Day. There's a massive fire plan to support this, the largest fire plan fired during the war on the Allied front, and to suppress and destroy as much as possible, but or at least stop the German guns from interfering with our operations. So on the early morning of the 24th, still in the dark, the bombardment starts before that. And then in the early morning hours of the 24th, the boats go into the water, and you'll see one of your stands. They have to cross a fairly wide area to get down to the river. They cross a dike. These rivers are all diked. In other words, back from the river themselves during flooding season, the rivers get much wider, as we've seen around the world with climate change. But there are dikes that stop them from getting too far out of hand, but those dikes become barriers for us trying to cross them. We're going to haul our boats over the dikes and bring them down to the water's edge. There's also if you see at the bottom, this is a 5-mile indicator here. there is a 60-mile smoke screen laid by chemical smoke generators, basically large burners run by the engineers actually, that pump out smoke continuously for the entire day over the whole length of the front. So the whole valley of the Rhine River is full of smoke and shell dust and shell smoke as well. So it's very obscured, hard for the Germans to see where things are happening, but also hard for our soldiers to get oriented as they cross the river. So that initial assault is relatively successful in all cases. The 51st Highland Division goes across. They have under them for this battle the 9th Canadian Brigade, which is our Highland Brigade out of the 3rd Division. So the North Nova Scotia Highlanders, the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry Highlanders, and the Highland Light Infantry of Canada, they are in the 2nd wave for the 51st Highland Division, but they're the only Canadians, Canadian Army, besides the paratroopers, that take part in Operation Plunder. And they get across the river, and we'll see where they're going to go to expand the bridgehead to the north and the west towards the town of Emmerich, which you can see up here. The 15th Scottish crosses relatively easy outside of Deersfort, and the Commando Brigade, they basically cross the river and then they wait as about 200 RAF bombers bomb Wesel heavily, all armed with 1,000-pound bombs in this case. And then they follow the bombing into the town of Wesel, where they have a tough fight in the ruins of the town, but they seize it after about a day. So it's a little bit of an unusual task for a commando brigade to do this kind of assault, but they're used in this case by the British. The American front, the 30th Division and 79th Division, established 2 bridgeheads down that are separate but are eventually joined up. You see this blue line here? That's the bridgehead line that is eventually established at the end of the day. But what also, so that's Operation Plunder, and we'll talk more about that when we're on the ground, obviously. The airborne part of this is Operation Varsity, and you can see on this map, you can see the 17th Airborne and the 6th British Airborne, whose job it is to seize the other side of these woods. They don't want the Germans to occupy these woods in the middle and hold us up. So we want to capture this as sort of semi-high ground and woods, and also the town of Hammenkane here, which is sort of a major road and rail junction in the area. We want to try and secure that so that the Germans cannot counterattack down to the river and push us back. So that's their 2 major tasks. You'll notice the 13th Division isn't there, and that is 13th Airborne Division, and that's because there wasn't enough airlift to drop all 3 divisions. So the 13th Airborne didn't really do anything. They came in at near the end of the war and did some ground stuff, but they didn't actually drop any time during the Second World War. The 17th Airborne, this is their first operation. But the 6th is a veteran division from Normandy, although many replacements have come into the division since Normandy because they were down about 50%. And it includes the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion in the 3rd Brigade. And their role is to capture a particular hill within the woods to hold the Germans off, and also to be the link up to the 15th Scottish Division who are coming up from the river. So that's Operation Plunder, and it is generally a success. We have overwhelming force for this, and we did learn lessons from things like Operation Market Garden, the bridge too far, when things did not go well, and we'll look at that battle as well on our trip at the beginning of our trip. And one thing that they insisted is that the airborne divisions were dropped within range of the artillery on the west side of the river. So there was already artillery when they landed that could fire in support of these 2 divisions from the very beginning. So they were that close, within about 15 kilometers, 10, 15 kilometers. And so the link up happened very quickly. There was no long 60-mile corridor that we had to go through to get to the airborne divisions. They just wanted to ensure that they took this obstacle zone here, and the Germans could not take advantage of it. So Operation Varsity, which is the airborne part of things, it is actually the largest drop by paratroopers in one day in one lift in the war. It's even bigger than Market Garden. Market Garden had many lifts over many days. This is all the parachute regiments and brigades of the divisions landed on the same day. It's about 17,000 paratroopers. It's also the debut of a few new bits of equipment, like the C-46 Commando plane, which, if any of you have seen the Buffalo Airways TV show, they have a couple of those up there in Yellowknife. Brand new, much bigger than a C-47, much longer range, bigger capacity. It had 2 doors on one on each side, so more people could jump out of it more quickly. It had a little bit of problem with its fuel tanks in terms of self-sealing fuel tanks, but it was its debut. And as well, the British landed actually airborne tanks. They landed light Tetrarch tanks, which are basically about 8-ton tanks with a crew of 3 that they landed in gliders, in Hamilcar gliders, which are monstrous big gliders. So there was some new technology being used here, and the 2 divisions landed in relatively good order, although we'll get on to here. This shows the 6 British airborne landing zones and their actions up until the afternoon of the 24th of March. You see most of the division landed over here near Hamilcar. But the 3rd Brigade, which was the one the Canadians were in, was landed over here to capture this Schnepperberg Hill, which was sort of a hill in this woods that they thought could be held. If it was held by the Germans, it could become a significant barrier. So the Canadians and the other 2 battalions, the 9th Battalion and the 7th Battalion, all dropped into their drop zones, and we're going to go to those drop zones and gliders landing zones on our tour and see where they landed. Basically, they had a sort of a separate fight from the rest of the division as they, 8th, 9th, and the 1st Canadian fought through the woods here to capture this wooded hill. The other brigades, the 12th, the 5th Para Brigade and the 5th Air Landing Brigade, which landed in gliders, their job was to seize these bridges over the Isle River and seize the town of Hamilcar. You see it spelled Hamilkeln and also Hamilkine, depending on which map or which book you're looking at. So they basically, the 5th Brigade was to protect the left flank, and the Air Landing Brigade, which are all glider troops, his job mainly was to capture these bridges and capture the town of Hamilcar, which they did during the day. So the Germans were very much surprised by this operation. They knew we were going to cross the river at some point. They didn't know exactly where, but they didn't really expect us to launch a major airborne operation in this crossing attempt. So the Canadians landed in their landing zone, and a couple of people distinguished themselves, or one way or the other. Unfortunately, as I showed in the picture before, wrong way. Sorry, I'm going. The picture on the right, the CO of the battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Nicklin, was actually killed as he was coming down in his parachute and was hanging in the tree there, similar to that. That's not a picture of him. So the CO never actually touched the ground alive on that operation. And Jeff Nicklin was a legendary soldier in the battalion. He'd actually been the quarterback of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, or the Winnipeg Bombers, actually, before the war. So he was well known to many Canadians, and certainly a legend in his unit. Very fit, very lead from the front kind of paratrooper battalion commander. But unfortunately, he died before he landed on the ground. So his 2IC basically, of course, takes over. The other person we'll hear about on the ground is, of course, Corporal Topham. Corporal Topham was a medic in the Canadian battalion. And he earned the Victoria Cross in this battle, the only Victoria Cross earned in the division that day, or in this operation. And he was wounded. He was actually shot in the nose, across his nose, by a German bullet. So he was very painfully wounded, but refused to be evacuated. Just slapped a bandage on, whatever, and then proceeded to evacuate several troops during the ensuing action, and covered some troops with his own body as mortar bombs came down, that sort of thing. So he was, as a result of that action, awarded the Victoria Cross, sort of the last Army Victoria Cross earned by a Canadian in the Second World War. So there's that map again, and this next picture sort of overlays the World War II map on the modern Google Earth map. So the town hasn't gotten that much bigger, and actually the Autobahn that was being planned in 1945 is actually there now. So the big major highway, and we'll be going over here to this location here. So the Deersfort der Wald is the woods we're going to be going into or looking at as we look at the battles of the Canadians. So they link up. Go back to the more clear map. So the Royal Scots from the 15th Scottish Division link up with the Canadians and the British at about 1400. So they only drop. The drop only starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the landings actually are going. They're already across the river, and then the paratroopers land. That was once again to avoid any potential of not linking up with them. But they drop in daylight, and as a result of that, the Germans do have a lot of flak guns. They have about 800 flak guns in this defending this area, anti-aircraft guns of various calibers, including about 150 88 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. And the aircraft cross across the Rhine, sort of perpendicular to the Rhine, going sort of southwest to northeast to go into the drop zones. And so there are 72 aircraft shot down in this operation, 72 American or British either glider towers, gliders, or paratrooper aircraft. In addition, sort of minor navigation error, one of the American parachute regiments, the 517th, actually drops in the British zone, drops across the boundary in the British area, and they quickly figure out that they're not supposed to be there once they bump into some Brits and figure out where they are, and they head back across into their zone further to the south. So by and large, a very successful battle. On the varsity side, there were about 2,700 casualties total. That's killed and wounded. Compare that with Market Garden, where just the British 1st Airborne takes about 5,000 casualties itself. So much less casualties. As I said, 72 aircraft. An unknown number of Germans are killed and wounded, but they do capture 3,500 prisoners during this battle. So large casualties. And the 84th Division, if I go back to this map, the German 84th Division ends up being completely surrounded and wiped out, basically, in this battle as a result of both the airborne and the ground troops landing. On the plunder side, for the troops going across the river, the British troops take about 4,000 casualties, and the U.S. about 2,900, and the Allies capture about 16,000 prisoners in this battle. So that's, I think about all I'm going to cover. I know there's another group going to talk about the consequences of this battle, I think. But if anybody has any questions, I'll stop the share so I can see your hands better, and we'll come back. So if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make, please raise your hand, and we'll carry on. If not, we'll move on to the next group. All right.
Okay, well, we're not seeing any hands. But thank you very much, Dave. That's a really good, succinct way of presenting Op Varsity and Plunder as a group, and how successful it was compared to Operation Market Garden that Gary had presented a couple of weeks back. So really good, great, thank you. I'm going to ask Lieutenant Ed Zhang from 32 Service Battalion, if him and his team have something to add to this.
Sure thing, John. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
It's great. So we did most of our research on sort of like the aftermath of the battle, like consequences, and sort of like essentially what happened after the success of Varsity in particular. We focused on mostly because there was a wealth of greater content. I will probably be the primary speaker, but thank you to my group who put together a lot of great information for me to speak on. So, and I'm hoping this will be partially discussion based, just because what we'll focus on is, while it was RC itself was a great success, there's always the critic that argues that was it really necessary, and even if you were able to complete your objectives and minimize casualties, could you have done that without any casualties or investment in manpower? So starting with the casualties, as Dave mentioned before, the casualties were a lot less than Market Garden. And a specific note was that losing paratroopers in particular were kind of a new thing at the times, which means they were a lot more valuable. They took a lot more time and resources to train. So while it's maybe taboo to say, losing a paratrooper kind of meant a greater loss of investment than, let's say, your normal infantryman. This is one thing to consider with conducting a major airborne drop like this, where you're expected to lose essentially more per soldier than you actually lose. Arguably bigger loss was this new CD-46 plane. He mentioned a lot of them were downed, and most of the casualties during this operation were taken during the first phases when the planes were flying over and before the troops had actually reached the ground. As you mentioned, these are new expensive aircraft, and after this operation, I think it was General Ridgway prohibited the use of these in any future operations. So they were used during Varsity. They saw, all right, this is probably not worth it from a cost benefit standpoint. Decided, okay, maybe shelve this for later. And I'll talk more about airborne operations post Varsity. It's not a whole lot, and it sort of takes an interesting turn, as more knowledgeable historians know. But yeah, so that's sort of good overview of a greater look into the casualties and the loss of Varsity. It was less than Market Garden, but it's still something to consider when we get back to the point of the 30th Division, I believe, might have been able to do their job without this entire drop. In terms of battle honors and awards, there was only one Victoria Cross given out, which Dave talked about. The Americans, in their usual fashion, gave out more Medal of Honors to their troops, several of them posthumous. And as far as, it's quite interesting, as far as unit awards, there was no distinct service award or honor for Varsity. It was instead of this specific operation, all units that participated were included in the sort of overall Rhine participation trophy. I know there's a proper term for it, I just don't know it, but they were included in that overall kind of a group instead of a specific Operation Varsity or Plunder. So as far as awards go and perpetuation, the first Canadian Parachute Battalion was quickly disbanded after World War II. They returned, and they were later perpetuated by the Canadian Airborne Regiment, which, I mean, the story kind of ends there. We couldn't find anything else about that because we all know what happened to the Canadian Airborne Regiment. The Americans, on the other hand, the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which is a part of the 17th Division, is the only U.S. formation to still kind of be in perpetuity today. They are part of the U.S. Army Infantry School, so they weren't put as part of the 82nd or the 101st, stuck in the school. And as far as a legacy and monument today, there is actually a monument in Weasel. I don't know that this is part of the tour. I don't remember all the details, to be completely honest. But there is a monument honoring those lost during the operation, and the British and Dutch is sort of a joint memorial / operation. They conduct an annual jump, same area that 80 years ago their armies did the same thing, except it was only the British at the time. So as I mentioned earlier, as we all learned earlier, this was sort of the largest and sort of the last airborne deployment of World War II. And as I kind of talked about before, there was a great loss of equipment and manpower. Today, these kind of airborne operations, I could be completely wrong with this, but as far as you research, there really isn't that much use for these kind of airborne operations. So you could honestly say this might have been the last airborne operation of modern warfare. It was a new thing that was developed during World War II, and after World War II, people realized, it's less costly. You probably won't be fighting, it won't be a tier 1 army versus a tier 1 army. And as you probably learned, the Russians, if you try to land troops, you will take heavy losses, and the loss of equipment nowadays isn't losing a C-46, which is expensive. It's losing a C-130 or a C-5 or something that's way more expensive. Anti-aircraft technology has improved, so you have to find other ways of getting troops in. Dropping them from the sky is a lot more dangerous and costly now, which is why this battles, I think, serves a very interesting, has a very interesting legacy, because in our opinion at least, it's kind of the last time you'll probably see something like this, a massive drop, landed successfully. And while on the topic of success, one of the biggest arguments that I mentioned before was that you really need to drop all the troops, conduct on varsity to actually conduct the drop, mostly because, well, your infantry on the ground could have probably achieved the goal. And also, of course, Operation Market Garden was probably a influencing factor as to why you dropped your troops so close, but you dropped your troops very close. They weren't behind enemy lines, and which is at heart what your paratroopers are kind of meant to do: go behind enemy lines and sort of like link up with your advancing forces. I'm not a historian. I'm not a great military tactician, so I'm hoping someone else has some more insight and knowledge into sort of an actual perspective onto how necessary and how truly successful this operation was. Please, someone.
Well,
Okay, thanks, Edward. That was good.
Couple of comments there I can add. Certainly, you're right in that what spelled the death knell of all this is the helicopter. Right? Once the helicopter comes along, you don't need as many airborne. You don't need gliders anymore. And so the advances in helicopter technology in the 50s and 60s sort of puts paid to the traditional mass parachute drop, and parachutes become used for very small unit insertions or supply drops and things like that. So, and yeah, you're right. There was a lot of criticism of Monty for doing a landing and a crossing and a landing, if you like. It's like belts and braces, as the British would say. You got your suspenders and your belt, but Monty didn't like to waste troops' lives, and so he always took the most cautious approach. Sometimes we would say, but that can be debated. And at just before this battle happened, Patton wanted to get his army over the Rhine faster, and he ordered one of his corps to basically charge across the Rhine down near Frankfurt, and it did, but it took a huge amount of casualties doing that. But the American army by that time is over 1 million strong and getting bigger, and the British army is getting smaller. The other thing, of course, that hangs over everybody's mind as they're coming to the end of the war in Europe is the Pacific. And so there definitely would have been more airborne operations if the Allies had to invade Japan, and they were planning for that. All of those airborne divisions were going to be transferred to the Pacific if that needed to happen. And so, they don't know the war is going to end in August, but yeah, it is sort of a moment in time that from 1940 to 1945, 50, say, when mass airborne formations actually come to pass in modern operations.
So thanks, Dave. That's really good. I was wondering if there were any other members of Edward's party that wish to have something to comment on.
I do, sir.
Hi, Veronica. What do you have to say?
Hi. Good presentation. And I also wanted to bring up the points for soldiers' lives. It's not just the loss of life that should be considered from a logistical context. It's also the category of wounded that should be considered from a logistical context, because every wounded soldier requires medical care, administrative processing, convalescence, transportation to another facility. And while this was probably a matter of routine, it still requires planning and execution at that point, and that's a logistical function. And as for the C-46s, that was a fascinating read for my part. The C-46 was a brand new plane that was going to be first used. It had twice the troop capacity. It had dual exit side doors. And it also is a good point to prove that finding out whether or not your equipment works during a battle is not necessarily the best time to find out, because the C-46 had a lack of self-sealing fuel tanks, and that proved to be a major danger, because when it was punctured by German bullets at the critical low range to drop out the paratroopers, all that fuel streamed back and created an extreme incendiary hazard. That's why during the drop, the first half hour of Op Varsity had the greatest losses because of that. And because of that lack of self-sealing fuel tank, that's why they weren't used in future paratrooper. They were banned from that. It was a very fascinating read, along with gliders as well. So thank you.
No, thank you. That's great. And your enthusiasm is wonderful. General Dave, anything else to add? Still on mute. Dave, still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, as Warren Drost pointed out, there have been airborne operations or parachute operations since World War II, and but no divisions dropping at once. I think the largest was 173rd Brigade landing in Iraq in 2003, I believe. So that's probably the largest that has happened. But yeah, the day of the large multi-division 17,000 troops landing out of multiple planes is probably past, but as I say, there's still a place for them on the battlefield under the right circumstances. But as mentioned, the air superiority and the vulnerability of aircraft is, as we see in Ukraine right now, there aren't a lot of planes flying around in Ukraine because of air defense, the strength of air defense. I see Robert Holland has his hand up.
Sir, I was just curious, just to add on to your comments about airborne divisions. So let's take, for example, the Ukraine war, what's going on right now. Do you think that there's anywhere where they could be implemented or utilized in what's going on right now?
Well, just from outside observer, I think the problem is none of their air forces are really working to high capacity because of the strength of air defense. You know, they both have very effective Soviet or Russian-based air defense systems, and you saw the air mobile they tried to do at the airfield on the very first day of the war. That basically got slapped down because they couldn't get in to reinforce it. They couldn't once they landed on the ground, but then eventually they were all wiped out by the Ukrainians. So once a defense is organized like that, and an integrated air defense, it'd be challenging to do that. I mean, the airborne forces are fighting on the ground on both sides, but I don't see the context for a large airborne operation right now. Although you never know, Ukrainians and the rest, they've surprised us so far. They may try and do something again, but just the air defense environment in that theater is just so tough that it would be hard to do a large operation. Doesn't mean you couldn't send a couple of planes and drop somewhere, but yeah, you got to see what you're going to achieve.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments. Of course, I've always wondered, and I know that the Canadian Airborne Regiment, it was always and still is a topic of discussion from a historical perspective. Do you and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but do you think that there would still be value in an airborne regiment within the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, I mean, we sort of created it with the CSOR to a certain extent. It's sort of our Ranger battalion as part of SOFCOM is sort of does an equivalent kind of job. So that capacity of highly trained, highly motivated, high readiness troops is something every army needs. And whether you call it the Airborne Regiment or you call it CSOR or you call it the Rangers in the U.S., that capability is always something that an army would like to have. So the Canadian Airborne Regiment had a linkage to both the Devil's Brigade and the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion from World War II. But the capacity that's been developed in SOFCOM with the CSOR, I think, is the closest we have right now to that kind of capability.
Yeah, no, understood, sir. I appreciate the comments and your perspective on that. It's kind of like, I guess it's the same way I look at it as, the engineers, they call, I mean, some people call them the Swiss Army knife of the Canadian Armed Forces, right? I mean, they're multi-facet, they're capable of many different tasks. And it's, I always thought that even though that there's a dynamic type of war going on that may be asymmetrical, we always need to remember and train for that conventional war. And I think that what's going on in Ukraine right now is the evidence to support that. And, it's nice. Personally, I think that it would be good to have that in your back pocket, right? As a commander, the ability to deploy a unit, similar to the Canadian Airborne Regiment. I think that it would be a valuable asset had, if we end up in a situation where there's a conventional war again.
Yeah, and in theory, you could grab the parachute companies from the 3rd battalions of each of the 3 regiments if you wanted to create that airborne unit or parachute unit, I suppose, as opposed to airborne. But you're right. And the more tools the commander has in his toolbox, the better. But it's a question of choices that an army has to make as well.
Understood, sir. Thank you very much for your comments.
That's great. So is there anybody else from Edward's team, 32 Service Battalion, Southern Ontario, that wants to add to the presentation this evening? Not seeing any hands. Okay, so I'm going to offer our 2 historians that just came back from the recce if they have something to add on to this. Gary Campbell.
Yeah, the terrain, it's rather flat at Reeves, but went farther downstream to Hawk Elton, I think it is. And my God, they're assaulting up probably with a 45-degree slope, and we're going to go look at it, and it is just mind-boggling what they did. It really is. And I don't care if you have a massive artillery salvo to soften the enemy up, you still got to go up that 45-degree slope. And it just, I'm amazed. And that's what it.
Super. Thanks, Gary. That's a great point. John, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think I'll just build on the points that David has made and also the comment just from Gary. And I think it kind of relates back to one of the earlier comments from the syndicate about, was it really worth, why did we need the airborne piece? Was that a waste of equipment and human life? And I think that we can have a pretty good debate about that when we see the ground. The advantage, don't forget, warfare is fought on the physical plane and on the moral plane. And there is a shock value to 17,000 tough soldiers coming at you from the sky. And don't forget, as mighty as the ground forces that David described that were making the crossing in Op Plunder, they're still crossing a formidable defile. And the defile gives the advantage to the enemy. So to have airborne, a massive airborne operation behind you while you've got credible forces coming in front of you, there's a synergistic impact there. So I would encourage us not to discard, but to further and continue the debate when we look at the ground. And as Gary said, I was quite amazed. And the Rhine River, it really cruises. I don't know how many meters per second it's moving at, but it is not stationary. And
it's wide.
look for, and it's wide.
Yeah.
So I think that's my only comment. I'm looking really forward to talking with all of you on the ground. The last thing that struck me is the ghosts of 1945 and the ability to envision the battle in some of the stands that the team has prepared. It really does relate very well to what our 1st Canadian Army and what our allies would have seen. And it's really gratifying to take that in. So very rich experience. But I think that's all I have to add. Yeah.
Super. Thanks, team. Yeah, I think it's coming together. I have a couple of other points that I want to add on, more administrative. But I really want to thank Dave for his presentation and Ed and his team for what they've put together to help us understand the op varsity and veritable. Yes. Anyway, the crossing of the Rhine and the airborne insertion to assist the crossing of the Rhine. So thank you very much. I'm glad that somebody brought up the Seesaw thing and the Aleutian 76s in Ukraine, so I didn't have to. The first thing.
Jonathan Ferguson has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Please, Mr. Ferguson.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about the logistics of moving the landing craft in particular up to the Rhine. Certainly I've read Whitaker and Wicker's books about this campaign, and I've seen the movies, but I had no idea that these were the same kinds of landing craft on the same scale as what they landed on the beaches of Normandy. How were they moved? Do we have any information on the logistics behind that? Thank you.
Gary, go for it.
Yeah, okay, we're talking LCVPs, landing craft, vehicle, and personnel. And they have a footprint on the ground about the size of a 40-foot sea container. About 36 feet wide, 11-ish feet, long, 11-ish feet wide. And I've seen pictures of them being transported on the back of a little bit. So the actual transportation part is not so much the challenge as the mere fact you have them coming in from Amsterdam. So you have far out planning, possibly a month or more, months in advance, saying at some point in time, we're going to need these. We've got to get them there. We've got to move them forward up through the congested supply routes to get them in location at the right time. And you also are dealing with Royal Navy and United States Navy personnel who are going to man these. And the term logistical nightmare just keeps popping up. All credit to those who organized and planned and implemented the road movement portions. it's just mind-boggling what they did.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
So that, I hope that answers the question or helps.
Just sharing, I think I'm sharing a picture of one on the back of a truck
Yeah.
there. You hope you can see that.
Are there any other questions or people that want to inject anything on our discussion? I'm not seeing any hands, but maybe that's just me. I'm not that good at using the technology. Okay, so my points. I will send out to each of you the link for the dietary requirements so that our hotel rehorse knows if we have any of those. And I'm sure we do have some. The second thing is the Royal Canadian Logistics Service Association will be holding its annual general meeting as a hybrid event on Saturday, the 15th of April. It will be both Teams and Zoom, and those of you available to participate in person are more than welcome. It will be held at Canadian Forces Logistics Training Center in CFB Borden, Ontario. It will be on Saturday the 15th at 10:30 hours. And we're going to invite all of you to at least come in and participate in that event. It should not take more than half an hour, maybe an hour at the most, but it's an annual general meeting and it's required as us being an incorporated organization. So the more of you that can join us, the merrier. And it will be the exact same Zoom coordinates that you're using tonight. So please be aware, and please join us, and I will send you something to remind you of it. Dave, do you have Helen's quad chart? Could you share that this evening?
I just give me a second.
Okay, just to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
And as Dave is doing that, I'm going to ask Lieutenant Colonel Beaulieu if she has anything on the command side that she wants to share with people.
First and foremost, I do want to thank Mr. Patterson for the great presentation and the very good discussions and comments made by the group tonight. So it was very much enjoyable to understand more about these two operations, Varsity and Plunder. I do not have, John, anything specific that was brought to my attention. I do want to simply restate that if you do need to engage me for any issues, new fiscal year, if you haven't done your memorandum, to have the time off to make it to the operation, do not hesitate, please, to reach out to me. And if you have any issues with uniforms or any other administrative points, because we're soon to reach the month of April. That's all I have, John.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madame. And RSM, Mr. Morrison, anything to add?
Sorry, I was talking into a muted telephone, but no, I've got nothing else to add. Sorry, I wasn't here at the last one. I was on a recce for an exercise we're having and unavailable. Just to reiterate what the CO had to say there was for military personnel, make sure you've got your uniforms all up to date and you're breaking in your comfortable walking shoes and all of your regular travel stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of time on our feet and make sure you're comfortable and you have what you need, your cell phones and all of those good motherhood things are looked after. But if anybody has any questions or problems, feel free to get a hold of me. And somebody said they're going to be putting out some hints and tips from the recce that they just did. So that would be helpful for us all. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, RSM. That's great. So Dave's just put up the quad chart for the Log Victory Tour. Everybody take a chance to take a read at this. It will be published as well, both on our Google site. It will be emailed to everybody. But so you have an idea of things about the hotel.
I would add just one point of clarification when it talks about the hotel. You only need a voltage adapter if your appliance, if your appliance doesn't have dual voltage. And generally that means anything that heats up. But no, like computers, phones, all that kind of stuff, you don't need a voltage adapter. You don't need a voltage adapter for if you're bringing a hair dryer or an iron or an arc welder or something like that.
Yes, times have certainly changed since the first time I went to Germany, when we all had these big transformer things to operate 220 and 110 voltage things. Most of our cell phones and tablets and things are quite international.
Yeah,
but you do need.
Yeah, just to mention though, you need the two-prong
Correct.
adapter.
Right.
So you don't need the heavy thing, but you need to have that. And a lot of time the hotels, at least from when I was over there, if someone forgets it or whatever, they usually have a drawer of them. But you definitely need that. And then you're right, if it's for your cell phone charger or laptop adapters, they're all dual voltage these days. You just need the adapter to get into the voltage outlet.
No, exactly. And those are available locally in Europe. You can pick them up for a couple of dollars or a couple of euros. And because most things are USB, it just plugs into the USB adapter.
Question on the USB ports in the room. Are they USB-A, which is the older one that we're familiar with, or USB-C, which is a smaller oval one?
They're the old style ones.
Yeah, USB-A.
Thank you.
Yeah. About Europe has gone to, the EU has gone universally to USB-C, but they hasn't been retrofitted at all. All the hotels we were in on this trip all had, if they had a USB adapter, it was a USB-A.
Okay.
The issue about irons and ironing boards, you can get them from the front desk. They may have to be controlled stores depending on how much ironing you guys need to do for your uniforms and stuff, but they don't. It's not like a North American hotel where every room has an iron and an ironing board.
Good to know. So
the other part of this briefing was a graphic, and just let me get my annotation thing again. The hotel is down here at the Rehorst. And then the thing she's pointing out, the train station, 550 meters from the hotel. There's a grocery store and pharmacy about 800 meters away, and there's an ATM, the closest ATM, but it's only open till it's inside the store and it's only open till 17:30. The nearest one after that that's open at a bank is about 1.5 kilometers away to the south at an ING bank. So
Plan accordingly.
Ada is a smallish town, but you can get to for those so inclined, and I'll let the group decide on that. But you can catch a train from Ada and be in Arnhem in 10 minutes. But you got to remember when they come back.
Just a comment too for people on if you're thinking you need to convert money. The Netherlands now is pretty well from their last year now is they're pretty well digital and everything. So you're able to use even from apps. I use Apple Pay and everything all the time, or the credit card. But what they did at the airport, usual people think when you get to the airport and you go there, you convert. They took out pretty well most of their ATMs, and it's only by the one company. And if you use them, then there's a lot more surcharge on it. You certainly don't need to really convert to cash for much. And what they did in most of the places around now, it's one company that owns most of the ATMs around the country, but those ATMs then are for their 5 major banks in the country. So
we did notice that there are quite a few smaller places that don't take credit cards. It's cash only,
Yeah,
or what they
fine.
have in Europe is called a Maestro card, which is a MasterCard debit card. And so my MasterCard debit card here from the Bank of Montreal did not work. And so we had to run around, and I had to use the Bank of John Conrad many times to pay for our meals, because he is carrying a wad of cash. But that was only in smaller places and restaurants. So you just got to make sure you ask if you're in one of these places. But you guys, all your meals are provided on the trip, so it's only a little extra. And certainly the hotel takes all kinds of plastic.
All good points, but we should at least deploy individually with at least some euros.
Yes.
You know, kind of at least 100 per person as a good idea. More if you can afford it, but 100 euros will at least get you by in the first few days, and may get you through the whole tour, depending on what your tastes and expenses are. Okay, I'm going to ask Will if he has anything to add from the West Coast.
I just got to get off mute. Good evening. I'm glad to see so many people here. For the West Coast, we're going to have a final meeting on the 20th of April, just as a last hurrah. But the committee meeting is on, I think it's the 5th of April, is it, John? And any new stuff, I'll have you sent out. But it looks like Dave Patterson and John are going to send out a recce report, and Dave, I think you were going to send another newsletter.
That is the plan, yes.
Yeah, so you'll be getting lots of information, and I think Warren Donovan had an Op Faust chat group going, so I think you're all linked into that. That's about it, John.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give everybody a last chance to say something. John Ferguson, you had your hand up.
Sir, yes, there are questions in the chat.
Okay, questions in chat. Now I got to find a chat. Chat 10, okay.
Yeah, there was one about the Grosbeak Cemetery. There's something about the dates, but I think that'll be sorted out when Dave sends the next newsletter. Because we had some changes in the itinerary.
Yeah, our original plan was to go to Grosbeak twice. We will only go to Grosbeak once, and I believe that's on the 1st of May. We will forego with the 4th of May celebration in Grosbeak, but go to Holton and join the Dutch national celebration, which is very close to where we are, as opposed to going to 3. We'll do 2 ceremonies on the 4th. Does that make sense? Or it does to me anyway, and that's what we've planned. Tour buses have Wi-Fi these days. Not sure. I know we have a double-decker bus. I don't know if they have Wi-Fi. We can ask the question.
Yeah, I'll ask Ian Cowan what they have. I mean, this bus that you're getting is absolutely brand new. It's the pride of the bus company, apparently. And but I will ask him. Many tour buses these days do have Wi-Fi, but
yeah,
Warren Donovan here. I sent an email out a while ago, so people may not have received it. For about 30 euros, sorry, about $30 Canadian or 20 euros, you can get a SIM card or an eSIM that'll cover you for 2 weeks, unlimited data, calling back to Canada. So if anybody needs any details on that, I put my email in the chat earlier. Email me and I'll give you the details.
Yes, thanks, Steve. And so long as it's published on our little Google, whatever we have, it's not a Google Drive, it's a Google something else. It'll be available. So great opportunity. Anybody else for tonight?
Yes, John, I have a question about, they're talking about writing an article when we came back. Do we
Yes.
gonna get more information on that?
Yeah, I haven't really thought enough, but I will give direction on how we should do that. To
Okay.
make sure that there's some articles and some information play, and that we get some publicity for the Royal Canadian Logistics Service Association and Op Faust and what we are doing. And you guys have been fortunate enough to be selected for this. So with a little bit of effort to publicize what we're doing and what the Dutch have gone through and what we are doing to help them.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question about last meeting. You talk about signing up for the video that the ladies are taking from us. You said we need to sign up a sheet for that.
No, hi, John. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, once Ellison has got the documentary together, we're gonna share it with everybody. But it will take a little bit more time through the summer to get the studio time to make it all come together. So Ellison will do all that, and I'll make sure that it gets out to everybody. At least Stephen Donovan will have everybody's email address, so we'll get it to everybody when the time comes. It'll probably be on a Vimeo, Allison.
Yeah, if I can just interject there, Colonel, I will be posting to all of us a password protected Vimeo of the rough cut, not the completed version. The purpose of that is so that I can field comments from whoever wants to contribute. But once I go in for final post, which would be the broadcast version, we will not be doing changes unless there was something extreme due to cost. You have to think of it this way. It's like $1,000 a minute in post-production. I'm still trying to raise some of the post-production costs. That is for it to be high def, et cetera, fully viable for full broadcast. So we have broadcast qualifications that have to be in for the viewing, but the Vimeo, everybody will be able to watch it and get a feel for how the story is developing. And I'm relying on everyone to obviously give me feedback, and we will adapt as much as we can at that point. I'm still targeting for the November 11th broadcast week, as this would be a new exciting offering. We are also looking at international release. So it's not just Canada, this is to go global. And I'm already negotiating with the German consulate here to see if they would like to donate some funds. I'm actually, for the feature focus on Op Market Garden, I thought it would be great if we had some German sponsorship for that segment, because although we are showing all the allies work, we need to show the success, the operational success that the Germans had in that particular battle. Okay, sorry, that's it. And you're welcome to email me at any time if you have any questions, etc. I will be doing a feature focus. We're shooting every single day. And so we are going to have a lot of footage. A lot of that footage is not going to be needed in the documentary, in the sense that I'm going to end up with at least 4 or 5 hours of footage. But for the broadcast version, a broadcast hour is exactly 53 minutes. And so we'll be paring down, cutting down a lot. But we're going to have lots of great B-roll that can also be used by yourselves in other capacities for training, etc. So yeah, we will still have lots of great archive, which will be for the Guild, so that they can build up their own archival library for future projects, which you can use if you need to use clips for your own personal stories, etc. That's it.
So just to acknowledge that Allison's been working pretty hard. We've all been working pretty hard, but we're still raising money to finish the production. So if you know of anybody that like to donate towards the documentary, the RCLS has put money into it. The Guild has put a lot of money into it. Allison herself has put a lot of money into it. So if anybody's got any ideas about fundraising to help us finish off the project, you can get a hold of me. I should be on the email list. And anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Allison.
Oh, yeah, and just one other thing, tax receipts. Thanks
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
the Guild's charitable, with any donations, people will receive a tax receipt. Same thing for corporates. So yeah, that's who I'm targeting now.
Yeah, sorry, the Guild of Wagoneers is 39 Service Battalions educational charity. And all of this, what we're doing is for information and training. And so I can issue tax receipts for the full amount of any donations that people put in. How's that? Okay, enough for the ad. Sorry, John, carry on.
No, that's great. Thank you, Allison and Will. That's just the type of stuff we need. So last chance for anybody else to say something. David Patterson, last words.
Nope, thanks very much.
All good. So thank you, everybody, for this evening. Our next meeting is on the 12th of April, and we'll be talking about the Hunger Winter, Op Faust itself. And that's again, Dave Patterson and study group 3 from HMCS Prevo, which is Lieutenant Chang. Yes. So nice to see.
Actually, one thing, John.
Thank you, everyone.
John Conrad's going to take that one on for the team there, the Hunger Winter.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So John Conrad, who's had to leave us, will be running the Hunger Winter. And if he's not available, or if he's not ready, I will have something ready as well. So all good. Thank you, everyone, for this evening. Thank you, Steve Donovan, for all of your work on trying to put things together, and we'll make it work. So good night, everyone.
Night.
Have a good night.